Hello and welcome to our discussion of The Ritual from 2017. Today I will be joined with one of the writers from my website, SwedishNerd.com, to discuss The Ritual from 2017. So we will go through the movie, talk about an hour and discuss it. It will be a spoiler discussion because it's easier to navigate the review that way. But Jack, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name's Jack Berry. I am a filmmaker from the UK. I specialize in kind of horror and fantasy shorts, which I've been kind of writing and directing for the last couple of years. And before then, I've been studying film, probably for the last maybe 11 years. And me and Ellis met through a big meetup for the London Horror Society. They run these huge kind of Zoom chats, and through that, Ellis asked if I wanted to do some writing for the website, and that's something I hadn't really thought about doing before, writing reviews and articles and stuff like that. But I decided to kind of take him up on it, and I've been writing for the last few months the occasional article, review, top 10 list, and I've started making TikToks as well, which has been really cool. Kind of a way to because I'm freelance now, so that means that I do the occasional kind of paid job, but then I have the occasional day where I don't really have a lot to do. So it kind of helps kind of my day-to-day structure to just, if I have a free day, just do something for the Swedish Nerd website.
Good to hear that I can help you out in your creative path and give more work. That's great to hear. But since we have done both of our introductions, and as he mentioned, it is Helmersson. I'm the editor-in-chief for SwedishNerd.com and admin for Swedish Horror Nerd on Instagram. So we can begin the discussion of The Ritual from 2017, which apparently had a weird distribution history. It's kind of a Netflix movie, kind of a limited movie.
Yes, yeah, I had heard of it, and I remember it coming out in cinemas and it getting quite good reviews as well for a sort of a supernatural horror film. A lot of supernatural horror films that come out get slated by critics, and a lot of a lot of horror movies that you hear about, sometimes just don't get good reviews. So sometimes that's the reality of it. But I remember people raving about The Ritual, and people telling me that I needed to see it. And I saw that it was in a local cinema near me, and I kind of missed seeing it on one day, and then the next day it was gone. So it had a very limited run. And then it was a Netflix original in the UK for a little bit, I think. But now it's not on Netflix anymore. So I had to seek it out. It's definitely kind of, yeah, like I say, it's had kind of a weird release history.
Which is strange because it's produced by Andy Serkis.
Oh wow.
And it's Imaginarium Studios, which is first his effects company. He did Ultron effects in Avengers Age of Ultron, and he did Snoke in
Oh
Star
wow.
Wars Force Awakens. That company, and now later it became a production company in 2015, 2016, and was one of his first productions, that movie. And it feels like this man had like almost 20 years as a big hotshot in big studio movies, and now it's kind of hard for a production movie of his to get distribution. Kind of weird, but who knows what's
Mm.
going on behind the scenes. It could be director David Bruckner. This was one of his first movies. I think he had made, he worked on VHS, one of the
Mhm.
segments there, and some shorts. I don't think he had done a full feature length for this. I could be wrong.
I was surprised to see that he was actually American, because it's classified as a British film, because it was kind of mostly British production companies that were kind of behind it, like BFI and stuff like that. And on top of that, it feels very British. Like it's an all English cast, and the dialogue and the tone of it very much feels like British horror. So it's kind of interesting that it was um, an American director making a British horror film set in Sweden that was entirely shot in Romania. Apparently, according to you when we were talking earlier.
According to IMDb.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah.
But like you say, a lot of films end up shooting somewhere random like Romania because maybe they have a tax incentive or something.
It's the tax as far as
Mhm,
I know. I don't have a good source
mhm,
on what Hungary, Serbia, Romania, and Czechia. No, Arven. Why those places has become so prevalent
mhm,
for shooting low budget movies. Not only horror, but a lot of Bulgaria also.
mm,
But a lot of low budget stuff is shot out there, and I imagine it's a tax reason.
mhm,
Places look gorgeous for a horror movie.
mhm.
In this movie, the atmosphere is fantastic.
And like you say, like it's more or less identical to where you live anyway.
Yeah, it's like I didn't know this was shot in Romania. I would definitely have said that it was shot in Sweden.
Mhm,
I can't tell a difference, and that's impressive.
mhm,
By the way, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the plot of this movie, I have to point something out. They say that in Sweden, they haven't logged anything since the 50s.
mhm.
I don't know. That is completely wrong. That is only true for a small part of northern Sweden.
Oh right, okay.
Uh, because my dad, one of his source of income is forest logging,
Mhm.
and so it's a lot of people in this region. So it's a huge economy in Sweden, forest logging. So the fact that they said it was like, huh, that's weird. That's like a massive
I
part of Europe.
Yeah, but then interestingly enough, I think that character, because that was he had a name.
Right.
Was that Hutch? Hutch
I think it
Hitch
was that.
Hutch. I he always kind of says in the early parts of the films, he's always kind of saying stuff that sounds kind of clever.
Yeah.
So maybe either it's just a slip up, or there's
Yeah.
some truth in it because some parts of Sweden that does apply to. But just a random thing. I thought maybe that's just the character not necessarily being that knowledgeable and him just kind of trying to be a bit know-it-all about stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I found funny is that uh, considering I grew up around logging, I could tell that he said it right in front of three stubs that you can see was industrially cut down at least 20 years ago. I was like, hmm. You could see on the cut that that was a chainsaw. It's like, and that stub is like what, 10 years old?
So
Fantastic.
maybe that is an indicator that the director knew that what he was
Well,
saying wasn't true. But maybe it was just a mistake. But I
then,
do remember that. Yeah.
then again, if they're up in northern Sweden against the Norwegian border, like
Mhm.
that area is one of the few untouched, and it's the only
Mm.
untouched wilderness left in Europe.
Oh wow.
No human touch it. It's only hikers and
Because
research.
that line did resonate with me actually because he said he described England as being a car park, um, and I'm from like rural England, so I'm from the north, like Cumbria, which is like the Lake District, is like as far north as you can be in England without being in Scotland,
Yeah.
and that's all like lakes and trees, and it's beautiful and it's mountainous and it's really lovely. And where I live now, I love the city, but I live in Manchester, and a lot of the area near where I live, there isn't really that. Uh, Beautiful kind of countryside. So it did kind of resonate with me, like just describing England as a car park because I just live in a big city and it does feel a bit like that sometimes.
Like we have huge cities here in Sweden too that feels like car parks. So um,
It's from
Yeah,
an English tourist perspective of Sweden.
yeah, and I considering that I live in a near a hiking trail that is regularly used by tourists, I can say I hate hiking tourists. I mean, I wouldn't mind if they knew what they were going and didn't end up on the farm, or if they didn't throw the trash everywhere. I
Mm.
wouldn't mind their existence, but they're assholes. Stupid.
Did you
Yeah.
find it um, believable that this group of quite kind of laddish, manly men would
Mm.
go on a walk as their time off? Or do you think that, because initially I was like, oh, that's kind of weird, like, especially because some of them had never like been hiking before.
Yeah.
And they were talking about like, oh, should we go to Amsterdam? Should we go to like Spain? Should we'll go on a bit of a lad's holiday? And they settled on like going hiking. But or do you think that it was like the one friend suggested it, and then
Yeah.
after he died, they thought like, ah, well, that's what he wanted to do.
I think that's the sole reason why they went there.
Mm.
It's because to honor his memory. And I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if that's like one of the key points the creature focuses in on.
Mm.
Because it maybe like it feels the sorrow.
Yeah, yeah. I guess when we talk nearer the end, like when we talk more about the ending,
Yeah.
that is something that I was thinking, because it's not necessarily explained what the creature is or what it wants or what it feeds off, but it's very much attracted to the main character for the 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 thing that happens in the first 15 minutes, which is kind of his initial trauma that kind of
Yeah.
continues all the way through up until the end. So I guess, do you want to start talking about that first kind of 15 minutes?
Yeah, because the first 15 minutes, I mean, if you going completely blind, like you just see a black screen and someone starts this movie, at
Mhm.
first you think this is real life horror. This is
Mhm.
grounded criminal horror.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, it doesn't feel like any supernatural tone at all.
No, no, even down to like the handheld cinematography, it just feels very almost like British soap, kind of like soap opera kind of vibe, where we've got
Yeah,
stuff
true.
like EastEnders, where like the drama of it is just very normal and very grounded. Um, and the start is genuinely disturbing. I love supernatural horror. I do like murder and true crime and stuff like that, but sometimes in film, that seeing like a sort of a murder that happens in quite a realistic way does
Yeah.
weirdly affect me a little bit more than seeing a ghost or seeing something that's supernatural. And I love that um, within the first kind of 5 minutes, you're instantly kind of like you sort of join this conversation with these men kind of like halfway through, but you still quickly get a sense of who each person is, kind of.
Yeah.
um and especially the the main character, I think his name was Luke. Is that right?
It's Luke.
You get a sense of like when he wants to keep drinking, but they all want to go home, and he says, oh well, I'm going to go get a bottle of vodka. They all kind of look at each other to be like, is he kind of uh does he have an unhealthy relationship with alcohol? And it's almost like from the get-go there is like a history there, and you do get a sense of Luke
Mm.
and his relationship with the main characters. um as I was saying just a little bit before we did this stream,
Yeah.
I really liked that a lot of horror films do is structurally they'll show you something horrific within the first kind of 5 minutes. um and typically what they do is they show you maybe halfway through the film or towards the end of the film. An example of that in my memory recently is like the start of Don't Breathe,
Yeah.
where you see the character being dragged along by the blind man, and then it flashes back like a week or whatever it is.
Yeah.
A lot of movies do that, and I understand why they do that, but I at the same time I think it deflates a lot of the tension of the film, because you're immediately going kind of like from the very start, like, oh, okay, well, I know that this character ends up in a horrible situation, and therefore a lot of that tension is sort of deflated. But what I liked about this is you feel quite comfortable with these men, and they're just talking. It all feels quite naturalistic, and then they walk into the shop, and it turns out the shop is being robbed, and one of them is brutally murdered in quite a horrible way.
Really
Um,
horrible.
mm, and that kind of what I liked about that is that very simply puts the main character in a situation where he kind of has to face. He's sort of he's kind of challenged in a way that's like either he can stand up for his friend and kind of get over his fears of his anxieties about kind of defending his friend, or he can just kind of all let it happen. And I guess that's kind of that informs his character moving forward, and it's a very interesting way to start the film.
Yeah, and you pointed out something I didn't think about. That was that they implied that he has a formal, or that he has had a long history with alcohol in a non-positive way. And I haven't reflected on that. Like, it's that they point at that. I haven't thought about it. And that later on in the movie, that deepens the fact that the regret that it feels and why this thing targets him.
Mm.
It lives on regret, because not only does he feel regret because he didn't stop it, he feels regret because he knew that it was his decision that led him in that place to begin with.
Yeah. If he wasn't so reliant on alcohol, then he would have just gone home when and I guess that's the tragedy of it, is that it wasn't really his fault, but his friends kind of feel like it was, because they all wanted to just go home. And I actually really like the way that it's done. Is he's about to go in the shop, and his friends are like, okay, sure, and it's like he's just about to go in the shop, and then his friend steps in at the very last moment and says, okay, I will come in. And it's just this subtle way of being like, what could have happened, if that makes sense. It adds, I guess it adds to the tragic kind of uh side of it. And also I think it adds to this idea that the main character of Luke is a bit of an outsider to even his friend group, and there's a sense that when he's not around, they probably talk about him a little bit, and I think that maybe
Yeah.
kind of makes him feel a little bit of an outsider, or a little bit maybe a little bit paranoid, and generally he's like kind of the quiet one. If they're all having a good time, he seems a little bit more like the quiet one.
Yeah, and the script is very clever, and I don't know if this is a script or a book, because as far as I know, this was based on a book. But whoever made that decision, this movie has a structure where you find out a lot through one word or one facial expression, because that facial expression is so smartly chosen.
Mm.
It's like, yeah, that facial expression in this context tells 1,000 words, and you might not get it immediately. When
Mm-hmm.
you start reflecting upon it, you start to understand the full story. The movie itself, I don't think, tells the whole story. Not with the guys or with the creature. Like, when you reflect on it and like starts picking out those sentences and facial expressions and special makeup effects wounds that appear, you
Mm-hmm.
start to understand the story.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a movie that keeps telling its story after you watch it.
Yeah, I weirdly found, I guess I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I found that naturally you would have thought that by the time his final friend is being sacrificed, you would have thought that his kind of redemption arc, in a way, would be getting the opportunity to save his friend after not saving his friend in the first 10 minutes. But he still doesn't even manage to do that. So it's not like he has a moment in the story where he has his big character arc, and therefore he's a changed man. It is slightly more realistic than that. in which he's full of regret. He's faced with challenges that kind of present the opportunity for him to kind of redeem himself, but he's still sort of reluctant up until the very end to kind of become the hero. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of like it becomes the hero of his own story. That is when he can escape. That is jumping way ahead. Let's
Yeah.
let's go back. Have you? I haven't had any really more things to say about the real horror opening of this. Otherwise, we can jump forward to mountain and when they start moving into the forest.
Yeah, no, I guess nothing more to add, but just yeah, I thought I just really liked that the opening was structurally the opening was scary in a very different way to the rest of the film, and I liked that they decided to do that rather than the typical thing, which would be show some horror and then flash back, or if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does make sense, and but but yeah, this movie is definitely like it shows it all, while showing very little. It's very impressive, and the fact that this I thought about new Hellraiser that comes out this year, directed by this guy,
Mm.
and I got really excited thinking about this because this is gonna be an interesting Hellraiser.
It's like he's done a very good job of taking the supernatural and making it feel kind of tangible and real.
Yeah, this movie feels real. But anyway, we move forward to they're out the mountain. They're hiking. It's 6 months later. They're in northern Sweden. It would be no. I'm not the greatest man with the regions in Sweden. Weirdly enough, I know the states in US better than regions in Sweden. Can't explain that part, but as far as I understand, they're in Lapland, which
Oh
is
right, okay.
way up north.
Mhm.
It's or Alaska, you could kind of say. It's not a direct comparison, kind of bad comparison, but the closest comparison. I have no
Mhm.
idea what other countries would be a good comparison. But so they are in this mountainous region and they decide they would go through the forest because their whiny friend that looks very much like your whiny friend uh,
Yes.
twist his ankle or something, and
Mhm.
love it. This man like complains all the time, but clearly he can keep up with him. He's not even behind them. He's like in the middle.
He plays it very well because it's like he's very much a there's a word for it, like a hypochondriac.
Yeah,
It's where he's quick to diagnose himself with like the worst possible thing. Uh, like when he gets hit in the nose, he's like, "Oh, you broken my nose." It's like his first thing that he says, and it's like, "No, we haven't." Um, but no, I actually I found that character so unlikable, but I wasn't. That didn't kind of affect the film for me in a weird way. Like I admired that the actor could play unlikable that well.
yeah, yeah, and the acting overall is really good, and uh, you have those few countries.
Mhm.
Only like two I can think of. It's the UK and it's South Korea. I don't
Mhm.
know what's up with the acting schools in those two, but I feel like Australia and New Zealand too. It's like I can't think of a bad performance coming out of those places.
It's like most superheroes now are actually English actors because it's like Batman is English,
Yeah,
Superman was English, Spider-Man is English. It's almost like it's almost like American production companies just if they hear that you're English, they're like, yep, because I don't know, just something they like the idea of hiring English people.
but it's like it's the performances because
Mm,
it's like the South Koreans. Like I can't think of a bad South Korean actor or actress.
mm.
Like they all do an amazing job. Like when I liked I watch a lot of crime series, both from the States and from UK. I like to compare them acting wise because like even like the small roles are like fantastic in the UK, but in US they can be fantastic, and there's a lot of cases of fantastic side characters in crime. But like overall, it's just more realistic acting. It feels more like real people through the acting side in UK dramas. And Dad, he said it's because of their like Shakespearean school thoughts, something like
Possibly.
that. It's because of that.
I will say, for me personally, like anything horror that is British, I find myself more, not necessarily, I guess, scared of, but definitely more engaged with. That sounds bad, but
Yeah.
like, I think because there's so much American horror that, and because I'm not American, like, because I'm not American either, it's easy for me to think of Hollywood horror as kind of its own thing, which I love in and of itself. But British horror can feel a little bit more real to me, maybe because it's a little bit closer to home. But this film definitely, like, every character, I can think of people in my own life that feel exactly like that. Not just like, oh, I know someone who's a bit like that. Like, I know people who are exactly like the core characters.
It's I think the magical formula that British actors and South Korean actors and to some extent New Zealand actors uses is just they found some key to make them feel like living, breathing humans, not characters.
Yes, yeah,
Like
yeah.
some kind of acting school thought, I imagine that maybe only exist in those two places, or they're two different schools of thoughts that's very similar. I don't know.
Mm,
I know
I know.
nothing about acting.
I've never thought of it like that. Um, but yeah, no, in terms of that moment between the 6 month jump when they're in Sweden,
Yeah.
between that and the first kind of horror movie thing that happens, is when I've already forgotten what it was. It was like a deer or an elk. Yes, they come across an elk, and that's kind of the first sign that there's something kind of wrong, or something, or there's some kind of impending doom. But within that 10 minutes, I found myself quite, like, sort of weirdly taken aback by the jump scare that happened, because I sort of forgot that it was a horror movie for a brief moment in time, and I guess that's because it just kind of, it doesn't necessarily, it's shot in a way that sort of feels like a grounded drama, and it is color graded in a way that does work well within horror, but to me kind of feels almost documentary style, travel vlog style, something like that.
I understand what you mean, but I never got out of the horror style
Mm.
or it never disconnected the horror part of the movie with me
Mhm.
solely because of the atmosphere.
That's fair. That's fair.
The atmosphere and especially the music, like the music made me think of Hereditary or Midsummer.
Mm.
It like if I said to someone, "Oh, this is an A24 horror movie," I think they
Mhm.
would believe because it feels in a lot of ways like one.
Yeah, definitely. It has that, yeah, that kind of slow burn, kind of indie feel to it. Indie in like a good way, especially down to the cinematography that's just very handheld and a little bit rough around the edges.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I guess for me, in a way, because I'm from rural Cumbria where there is lots of mountains and things, and I know that being out on a mountain isn't necessarily the most colorful, beautiful thing. Like, being out on a mountain can feel cold and dark and oppressive. Um, and I think that the early parts of this film do capture hiking quite well, in a way that both works as a horror movie because it feels creepy and dark, but works just in terms of what hiking actually feels like. So maybe to me, that's why I kind of forgot it was, not that I forgot that it was a horror movie, but I was more thinking about the realism of the situation, and therefore when supernatural stuff started to happen, I was like a little bit kind of like, oh, if a little bit taken aback in a good way. I should add,
Yeah.
in a good way.
Yeah, it's like not the mountain parts because where I live we don't have the mountain parts, but the forest parts are
Mm,
definitely here where I live. So like the hiking parts, that definitely felt like part like school trips when I was growing up in school because all the school trips were hiking trips almost like some museums, but 70-80% of them were hiking trips. And so I grew up from time to time hiking, and it definitely has the correct hiking feel, as you said.
mm.
Kind of
Yeah, yeah.
interesting. If you have a mountain hiking childhood background, and I have forest hiking, so it meets in the middle.
Very, very much so. Yeah, but that's what a lot of outdoor life, especially in kind of Europe, doesn't feel very glamorous. But there is kind of like a haunting kind of beauty to it in a weird way. Um, but yeah, no. So in terms of where we are in the story at the moment,
Yeah,
yeah. So the annoying friends kind of twisted his ankle, and they've decided to make a shortcut, take the shortcut through this wood, which in a way feels like a typical kind of horror movie situation where they're like, oh, let's go into the scary woods. And they do make a few kind of like horror movie decisions, where it's like, oh, why would you go in the spooky wood? Why would you go in the spooky cabin?
yeah,
But I think the film does a good way, like the film does a good job at making you believe that these characters would make these decisions in the moment because they've added the ankle twist and then the rain, getting caught in the rainstorm. It's like a way of explaining why these characters are making the decisions that they're making in a way that feels believable.
yeah. And I don't remember. It was from a like explained video that I watched the first time I saw it.
Mhm.
And in that video, I don't remember the YouTuber, so I can't give a shout out. But in that video, he or she, I don't remember, but let's say he, says that this creature, Mordor,
Mhm.
is can control the forest. Everything in the forest is within its power of control.
Mm.
That makes me think like it starts the storm because it wants to pull them in that direction.
Oh, cool. I,
Um,
I I wouldn't have thought of that in a weird way, but I guess maybe that's because um you don't know, like within the actual film you don't learn a lot about the creature or what
yeah,
it kind
it's
of
very.
does.
I have no idea what's the that YouTube video source was, so I have no
Mhm.
idea how true my statement
Mhm.
is, but
I think it makes
it,
sense.
it does make sense.
Yeah.
But anyway, when they come up to the deer carcass,
Mhm.
what was your initial reaction? Like, what did you think was going on at this moment?
Yeah, so I didn't know a lot about this film before I watched it. I wasn't even sure if it was supernatural. Like I intentionally went in relatively blind. Um, I figured that a movie called The Ritual might have something to do with something supernatural.
Yeah,
Um, but then is I guess the name has a bit of a double meaning because I guess it's a ritual for the guys to get together every year or every couple of years to do go on holiday or have a bit of a hangout. I guess that's maybe why it's called the ritual
true.
as well, or maybe that's like a double meaning. Um, but yeah, no. So when they first come across that carcass, I wasn't 100% sure what the thing might have been. My initial thought was maybe there was like humans in the forest and maybe they were uh, setting up those wooden carvings and hanging them from trees as like a bit of a warning. And maybe they did that with the carcass as well. But the more you think about it, the harder it would be for a human to kind of pierce an elk up that high into the trees. Um, and if you thought of it as an animal, it's like, why would an animal do that? So I guess it makes sense, knowing what the actual creature is, that it was something supernatural. But my initial thought was that maybe it was humans. I don't know why. That was just what my brain was telling me.
So then we go to the cabin. You hear that screech out in the forest. What did you think? Like, what was the source of that screech? Because that's the first time we hear the creature. We don't see it, but we hear it for the first time.
Yeah, I guess in a weird way, I kind of thought that I don't know. I guess because the main character, this is going to sound it's going to sound like I'm kind of stupid, but the main character is quite often hallucinating things, and to a certain extent, and you get these kind of nightmarish sequences that overlap with reality, and to a certain extent, I think that as an audience member, you could kind of think of it as maybe it's happening in his head, especially because a lot of his friends are quite dismissive and trying to dismiss any kind of supernatural claims. Uh, whenever it's brought up as like, oh, this could be something unnatural, the friends are always like, no.
Yeah, it's like an hour into the movie when the friends first have their first like encounter of this thing. He
Mhm.
sees it first only,
Mhm.
which makes me wonder if that's the creature's intention. Like
Mm.
he's the chosen one, considering that it marks him.
Yeah,
And
like you said, the main character, the creature seems to feed off of trauma or fear or negative emotion. And the main character, out of the bunch, the main character has definitely been through the most. Like you say, he probably has a history of being an alcoholic, and he kind of witnessed his friend's murder. So it's like, I guess he's the one who has the most vivid hallucinations and that kind of thing.
I just realized that this thing has the same intention as Pennywise almost.
Yeah, I was sort of thinking like at the very end where he kind of stood up to it and it kind of backed off a little bit. It kind of reminded me of like Freddy Krueger, like the end of the first Nightmare on Elm Street, where it's like you don't have
Yeah.
any power over me, and he just kind of goes away.
Yeah, and that cabin, I have no idea if they built that cabin for the movie or if it exists out in Romania somewhere. No idea. But that cabin looks exactly like a cabin you would find out in Swedish wilderness. There are a bunch of them built during the 1800s, like old cottages for workers. And like everything looks exactly like the ones you can find out here where I live. And they all are creepy.
Yeah, it was creepy because for me it was creepy because it had the makings of like an Evil Dead cabin, classic kind of horror movie
Yeah.
cabin. It just didn't necessarily have the set dressing of a horror movie cabin, so it felt way more realistic. It was like no natural light whatsoever. Like all of those scenes were shot with natural light,
Yeah.
and the cabin didn't have a lot of natural light, so it felt very, very dark. In a way that felt a little bit more realistic than like like an Evil Dead, where it's like perfectly lit,
Yeah.
creepy cabin. It felt way more tangible in a way that was very creepy.
Yeah, and so and yeah, in that cabin, like everything, like the stair, the way the stair looks is exactly like those cabins. So really impressive to see. In a lot of cases, those you can't go upstairs in those cabins, at least to the ones I know, because the floors are pretty rotten. Just fall like.
Mm. When
And another
we
detail. Go
Mhm.
ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say. So are those cabins from like a particular era?
Yes, as far as I know, they're from a particular era.
Because there's
And
the only people that they find evidence of being in the woods before them is like the 80s or something like that.
1984, but that was a
Mhm.
hiker.
Okay.
These buildings, based on what I know about Swedish history, built around the same time as the Victorian era,
Oh right. Okay.
mid to late Victorian era. So
Mhm.
somebody built those cabins because in the like, during the Victorian era, which like It raises questions about the timeline here.
Mhm.
Those cabins, like, because there's several of them too. So yeah, and all of the guns are the same thing. Like everything is
Oh
1800s.
yeah, yeah. He has like a musket rifle type
Yeah.
thing.
So everything tells me that there was like a village of people in the 1800s that came across this thing, decided, hey, we want to live forever, did
Mhm.
it. The price
Yeah,
of what they are.
yeah. So those, I guess I'm jumping ahead a little bit again, but because we're on the topic of it, I'm just going to bring it up.
Yeah.
Towards the end of the film, when he is in the kind of village, he comes across a room of skeletons that are kind of breathing and alive. Is that just because it's not really explained? But do you think that that is just the elders of the village who've been alive for hundreds of years, but their body is physically aging, but they're the fact that they've done this kind of spiritual practice means that they can't die?
It could be that. I was actually thinking the same thing because, like the other human-looking humans in the village, they look like they are from the 1800s.
Mm.
Like this thing goes back to the Nordic gods.
Mhm.
So I wonder, I don't know how, but I wonder if it's like a Viking village that came across this thing and made a deal. And then 800 years later, 900 years later, there was another group that also came across this thing, made it
Mhm.
a new deal to take care of the elders.
Mhm.
So
So
that is, I don't know what makes these two groups come in contact with it, how an entire group came in contact with it at the same time. Some
so
explanation would be nice.
so they might be thousands of years old, or maybe 1,000 years old,
Yeah,
and they are because that scene scared me more than it was like not that it scared me in like a jumpy way, but it scared me in like a just it felt very creepy uh
yeah,
going through those bodies. It reminded me of they reminded me of like the grandpa from Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
yeah,
where it's like
definitely.
clearly he's dead, but then he's alive. And the sloth body in Seven, where
Yeah,
he's rotting away, but he coughs, and it's like he's actually still somehow alive. That I love that.
yeah, and it has a throne, which
Oh yeah.
makes there's a throne in the middle, and that feels like a Viking throne.
It looks like heavy metal album artwork or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
very yeah.
so I wonder if it's not like two separate groups that somehow became connected after 900 years or something.
I guess that's a good thing. Like a thing that I did like about it is that I understood what the main character was going through, but I wasn't told a lot about the the law and the evil and the enemy and the horror stuff that was happening, which I did really like because it meant that I was never confused because I knew what the main character was. I knew where he was emotionally. I knew his story, but I did like all the uncertainty. I think that sometimes in horror there's a tendency to over explain, like maybe if they did a test screening. I think
Yeah.
it was Lights Out. David F. Sandberg did a test screening, and there was no backstory for the main monster, the
Mm.
main ghost. And after the test screening, lots of people were like, "Oh, it would have been a bit more interesting if we learned a bit more about the character, the this creature." So then they
Mm.
wrote all of that backstory, and then they did loads of reshoots. And David F. Sandberg said that his main regret for that film is doing those reshoots because he thought it was much scarier when you didn't have the explanation.
Yeah, but like I'm the mummified corpses that are alive, like no need for an explanation. It could be like, yeah, like our fear is probably the truth. That is
Mhm.
like the Viking king from 1,000 years ago that's still alive. That must be a fun life. But what really confused me is this blonde lady that all of a sudden can speak English. Not
Oh
only
yeah, that's
English, but
true.
modern English.
That's true. Because none of the other ones, all of the other elders were very quiet, and I think at one point someone shouted at him in Swedish, maybe.
I couldn't understand a single word. That was blah 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 blah.
Maybe it was just
Um,
some Romanian extra who, you know,
uh,
was just
yeah,
speaking in his own language.
most likely. Like, this is for the Americans. They won't know the difference between a Latin language and a Germanic one.
Unless it's some kind
Um,
of ancient Swedish talk.
True, it could be ancient Swedish. True, maybe this movie is more smarter than my egocentric brain gives credit for. It could be like some ancient Swedish because like there exists enough research into Vikings that we have kind of an idea what they sounded like when they talked. It could
Mhm.
be that. My theory with the blonde chick, and now we are really stepped forward, but the theory with her is that she is the woman from 1984.
Oh,
That's my
that makes
theory.
sense actually, because you see a picture of the family. I think they're called the Ericssons, which is like probably the most generic Swedish name that they could have chosen.
Svensson and Andersson is, but it's up there.
And there's a picture of them, and yeah, I think it's the mum was there was like a maybe there was like two adults and a child, and
Yeah.
either it's the child grown up or maybe the mum has wandered off and joined this cult.
But if, as far as I understand, as soon as you pledge your allegiance to this thing, you stop aging.
Mm,
Think so that the mom would make more sense because otherwise it would be a kid, as far as I understand. Like the
yeah.
rules, I can't get a hang of the rules.
One thing is they were all immortal, but it was quite easy for him to kill them. And maybe it's a if they have the creature, if they have the immortality, they it just means that they can't die a natural death, but you can still murder them quite easily.
I think so. I think that's
Mhm,
the because it's even though it's a literal god,
mhm.
um, it's I think it's very its laws is still in natural boundaries. You can't make someone heal from a gunshot wound. Um,
And I liked when the older woman spots him when he's kind
yeah,
of coming down the stairs,
um,
and she points him out, and he thinks about it. He thinks, "Oh, what am I going to do? What should I do?" And then he just punches her in the face.
yeah,
It reminded
but
me of the Wicker Man.
yeah, bees, not the bees.
when
But
there's just, I was going to say there's just like compilation videos of the scenes in the Wicker Man where Nicolas Cage is just running around punching the cult because he like karate kicks them and things. But
I'm gonna
anyway,
tell my continue. There's a, but I'm gonna tell my grandchildren that was Midsummer. Then yeah,
that's a thing. Why do you think that there's been more than one mainstream horror movie about tourists going to Sweden and then very bad things happen?
because us Swedes are preparing to eat every American we can find. Oh, it's I
Fair
don't
enough.
know. It's probably because it's exotic enough, but we are like the Germans,
Mm.
where our history and lore is very violent. Like like
Oh,
take Santa Claus for an example. Like
yeah,
I imagine in England, as far as I understand, you hand out milk and cookies to Santa Claus.
yeah,
Here in Sweden, we hand out rice porridge to the Christmas gnome, which is the same thing as Santa Claus but short. And we don't do that because we want to be nice. We do it so it doesn't torch our home.
right, okay,
So I think that's why. And if you want to go to ice, it kind of just gets worse because in UK, America, Canada, be nice to Santa Claus and he won't give you a coal. In
Mm.
Sweden, be nice to the Christmas gnome and he won't ruin our lives.
Yeah.
In Germany, be nice or otherwise Krampus will kidnap you.
Mm.
Iceland, be nice or you will be cut up and eaten as Hannibal Lecter eats his victim. Like the Icelandic
It,
like the Icelandic lore, Christmas lore, if you take that as an example, literally
mhm.
has trolls eating naughty children, cooking them.
Maybe it does explain why a lot of kind of British and American kids can be a bit dismissive and a little bit disruptive and that kind of thing. But maybe kids in other countries are just like maybe a little bit more willing to listen and behave.
So, and we we just have a lore that's just very mysterious, like again and other stuff, and like we also have the pagan history, which I think
Mm.
fascinates people. Um,
It's like you're more connected spiritually to kind of nature and that kind of thing a little bit more than we are.
Not anymore. Nothing. We
Mm.
are now. We are like technology and science is the only way. But like,
Mhm.
go back a couple of generations. Like my great grandpa and his siblings.
Mhm.
When he talked about the stuff that we see in the ritual, not exactly ritual, but similar stuff,
Mhm.
like that wasn't lore. That was very much real life, and that's something you respect.
Oh right, okay, wow.
And so that was people born in 1890s. Like my dad, he talks about his great aunt. Like, yeah, like I've seen the forest witches. Like I saw them one time, and I know they're real. I pay my respects, and I think that's like I imagine like if any of my friends sees me talking about like this, they're gonna go like he's insane. Like we never thought any of that was real. That's child stories, but no, 100 years ago this was reality. And my dad, he tells me stories from time to time about like what they say they saw.
Oh wow.
And so I mean,
What do you think? Are you skeptical, or do you think that there is something kind of evil in the forest?
I don't think it's evil. I think it's nature that we don't understand.
Mm. Mm.
They, because they spoke about it like it's just part of nature.
Mm.
And it's I know a paranormal researcher. He talked about like cultural energy,
Mhm.
like that. Like because we talked about like Bigfoot encounters. Like why is there so many Bigfoot encounters in the States? And he talked about cultural energy. I found it very interesting. Like maybe as like because the older generations they talked about the supernatural things, but
Mhm.
we don't. Is it because we are so far attached from nature that our culture and energy doesn't attach with the
Mm.
parts of nature that are fringe, that
Mhm.
don't show themselves voluntarily?
So we see less of that now.
Yeah.
Well,
So this
it's yeah. When sorry, when there's a theory about kind of like why Victorian people saw so many ghosts and spirits and things like that, and I guess you can go as far back as kind of biblical times and why people claim to see angels all the time, and it's because their brains were unstimulated. So it's like if your brain is sort of unstimulated, either you can think of it as like you're more likely to picture like sort of imagine something that you've seen, or you're more likely to, like you say, tune into some cultural energy than if you're constantly addicted to consuming media and looking at your phone and having your brain constantly stimulated. Maybe maybe that takes you away a little bit from being able to kind of tune into some kind of higher energy.
like I buy that theory, but I don't buy it in the way that's oh it's fake.
Mhm.
I like it's oh it's hallucinations. Like sure it could be part of that because hallucinations is a very natural part of our brain, but
Yeah.
um it's I because if if that were the case, numbers of paranormal encounters would go down right now.
Yes, yeah.
They're not.
But
They're going up.
yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Sasquatch
Yeah,
encounters, UFO encounters, everything it's going up.
that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about it like that. Because I guess I don't know, I get maybe because there's more of a stigma against people saying, "Oh, I saw a ghost," or "I saw a Bigfoot," or whatever. Maybe
Yeah.
people are less likely to be believed now, and maybe there's just the same amount of people, if not more, experiencing this kind of stuff. But a lot of people maybe don't talk about it as much, or it's not reported as much.
Yeah. Like those. Like, yeah, you could come with the explanation with like, oh, it's social media. It's because people want a platform to fake it. But then again, I don't buy that either because there's like when I on an almost daily basis like study paranormal encounters.
Mhm.
When you look at the people sometimes that reports these things, you really like that's a biologist. Why
Mm.
would a biologist make something up? Why would a court judge make something up?
Mhm. Mhm.
Like it's why would
It's
someone
normal.
that
It's not
yeah
kooky kind of crazy people. It's people who
no
seem
no.
quite level-headed. Yeah.
So I think that like all the explanations you can throw at it were like, oh, it's because they were unstimulated or they were that or it's because social media. Like yeah, I think there's truth to that, but I can find a loophole in 5 seconds for you. If you can find a
Yeah.
loophole in 5 seconds, does that really hold up then?
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. Um, but yeah, no. I would definitely say that from an outsider's point of view, it seems like Swedish culture is maybe a little bit more spiritual than our sort of British culture currently is. Which is maybe why, and I guess maybe it is to do with nature as well. That
Yeah.
there's more kind of beautiful Swedish countryside than
But,
there is British countryside.
but like we, when I reflect about on our generation, like we, ghosts is still something that is seen a lot here,
Mhm.
and like I can don't eat the cable, you stupid animal. Anyway, um, but I because there's still like people that highly believe in ghosts out here,
Mhm.
like the
Mhm.
paranormal. So like some connections still live on. And there's like still people that to this day can't explain what they saw, and like there's even I know of people that don't believe in anything, that have that one moment in their life
Mhm.
they can never explain, no matter how hard they
Mhm.
try. So, uh, we took a detour about Swedish culture, which is an interesting topic, and
Mhm.
it's
It's relevant. I would say it's relevant.
yeah, it's very relevant because of this movie, and it's
I would say if this film was um, to spell it out for you a little bit clearer, they maybe would have included some kind of like maybe some sort of Swedish tour guide, a little bit like Midsummer,
yeah.
where there's the guy who's from Sweden who's introducing the main characters to the culture, and he maybe explains some stuff in English to kind of spell it out a little bit clearer for the characters. But I suppose the difference between this and that film is that it already kind of starts with them halfway through the trek.
Yeah. And
So
another yeah,
yeah.
continue.
Oh no, just yeah. So we're introduced to them kind of already in the middle of the wilderness, and we've not really been shown the kind of comfortable side of Sweden in a way.
Yeah. And it's and what is interesting is here they are in, as I said, Lapland, so that's Sami culture, and but they don't have anything from Sami culture. It's all Swedish culture, and the
Mm.
Sami people is people that live up north.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
so it's they are related to the Finns. They're not Germanic speaking. They're Uralic speaking. people. And yeah, so like when you are up there, you could technically like make something about Sami culture when you're so up far in northern Sweden, but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe Swedish culture was more like they could find more creepy, realistic, real, like hidden things, pagan things.
One thing that was interesting is that you said that you find this to be almost like your comfort film.
Yeah, because of the atmosphere.
Do you find it
And
quite homely because it's about where you live?
maybe it's not the correct part of Sweden. That's northern Sweden. I live in central Sweden. But it could be that. I think another thing is, what are you eating? Okay. But another thing is that the creature is a moose thing. And I have a thing about the supernatural and mooses, and I think that comes from growing up in a hunting family. Not hunt
Oh,
personally, grew up hunting, so I think there's something about the moose hunting people, supernatural moose hunting people through the forest, that there's some kind of connection there.
it's like karma or something.
Maybe not karma, I don't know. It's kind of. It's also like when I was a kid, I still have this vivid memory of, I don't know why, but I had a fascination with dead things when I was a kid. As any sanely, not at all in the future a serial killer person would do, I had a fascination with dead things. And I remember when I was 10 years old, I had this um, hunting magazine that I like, and there was an article in the hunting magazine. It was at school, was it? We had like this. You can make your own art project if you felt like it. And what I did was I cut, because in the article it was the process of decay of a dead moose. What I did is I cut out the pictures of the decaying moose, put them in order. Yes, the pictures, not the explanations. I think it comes from that. That's kind of my connection, because its head is a dead body, decapitated dead body, which is kind of like something dead, and it's a moose, and it also kills people in the forest. So I think it's kind of like that connection too. I don't know, that moment in time, we're fascinated with the article of the rotting moose. It kind of stuck with me, and it still is stuck with me in a way. So I think that's its connection. It makes it weird that it would be a comfort movie, but I don't know.
I have slightly weird comfort movies, like Evil Dead. The 2013 Evil Dead is a bit of a comfort movie for me. I don't know why. I think it's just like an easy watch. Conjuring movies, I found them to be sort of like comfort movies. Um, and anything in the Conjuring universe, I actually find really relaxing to watch. I don't know why. Um, I guess because they're simple horror, where it just kind of you just in a way just kind of don't know seems like just a bit relaxing. Um, but yeah, no, the creature itself, I really liked it because I think that there's a tendency in horror recently, in blockbuster horror, where it's like if there's a creature, it's just a very generic looking kind of like alien thing. Um, Similar to like my least favorite creature in kind of modern horror is probably like the Quiet Place creatures, because I find them to just sort of be very generic, kind of. They're scary until you see them, and then once you see them, you kind of like meh. Yeah, do you know what I mean? You kind of just
Yeah.
it's just an alien thing. But I think that every single time I got a glimpse of the creature in the ritual, I was like, I have no idea what this thing is. I've got no reference in my brain for what this thing could be. It's like it looks like a moose, but it has human hands. Um, every time you see it, it sort of looks and acts a little bit differently, so you can never really get 100% used to its kind of power set or what it can do. Um, there's a bit where it sort of stands up and it kind of does almost like a thing, like John Carpenter's The Thing style kind of metamorphosis thing. Yeah. It seems like it's kind of almost like transforming into something else, or maybe it's just trying to intimidate him or something like that.
I have no idea. I've read I've read and armchair studied the mythology of the pagan gods, of the pagan mythos from Nordic countries, and I recognize the name Jotun, but I never came across like anything like this. So I have no idea if they like dug up some old pagan book and found this creature, or if it's like an original idea, because the idea of Loki's children exists in the pagan novels.
Mm.
Like the wolf, as far as I remember, is a child of Loki. Because
Mm.
like Loki, he he shapeshifts into different things. As far as I understand, he turns into a fish and has sex with a fish, but that fish isn't fully a fish.
Mhm.
That so yeah,
He
this thing, it's sometimes it feels like a wildebeest, sometimes it feels like a moose, sometimes its head is like a human decapitated body.
has like eyes, like human eyes.
Yeah,
It,
it's
it,
really
it it's interesting that they explain that it's Loki because, or that it's connected to Loki because early on in the film, they're kind of theorizing about what kind of spiritual energy lurks within the woods, and they talk about superstition. And I think it's Hutch says something like, I think maybe he talks about paganism or something like that, and then one of the characters says like, "Oh, I thought Swedish people worshipped like, uh, like Thor and Odin and stuff like that," and then he explains that. Then he talks about Norse mythology. So they do there is kind of reference that sets up the fact that the creature could in some way be related to kind of Norse mythology.
yeah. Wait, I just have to plug this in. This is how professional I am. But yeah, they do reference that it's Norse mythology, and you can kind of see on the the runes on the trees that it's
Mm.
pretty sure those are runes. So if those are ruins, that means you can figure out what it says on the trees.
Uh, and I guess because maybe if I knew more about runes and mythology, um, but as very much an outsider to it, I um didn't have a lot of reference for what stuff could mean or be, which made it scarier for me in a way.
I have no idea what anything of this means.
That's fair.
Uh, yeah, so
I'm
I'm just
assuming I'm assuming because you're Swedish, you have some knowledge of all things kind of weird and pagan and Swede.
it depends on your interest point at this point in our culture's history, but like I am very interested in it, so I do know a bit, but I'm not like an expert or anything. Like I bet there's
Mm.
some Swede out there that watches this movie is like, oh, that means that thing. Well, that's very interesting. I don't
Mhm.
know. That depends on like how. I'm not even sure if the thing on the trees are real runes. That's just a theory. I
Mhm.
I know on top of my head like some rune symbols, but they don't really register, so I don't know. What I did find interesting is that in the cabin, this sculpture thing that they find,
Mhm.
um, that it has like the duck or chicken feet.
Oh yeah, it definitely has bird feet, like real bird feet.
Yeah, because there's the legend of the woman in white, which is a witch. It exists in different cultures around the world: Germany, Sweden, America, Canada. There's sightings in the paranormal to this day of a woman in white, and like if in a lot of haunted properties she will appear, but also like UFO properties and Sasquatch properties, she will also appear. But anyway,
Oh wow.
in German folklore, it says that she has chicken feet,
Oh.
and you know the will of the wisp.
Yes, is that in Scottish law? I mean,
Yeah.
it definitely exists. Yeah, yeah.
In the German version, she controls them to lure children in, or something. No, the will-o'-the-wisps is the children she lured in and murdered, and that's the spirits like forever connected to her.
Oh, interesting.
And in Sweden, we have Skogsrået, which is a witch in white.
Hmm.
Is the witch that my grand aunt said she saw.
Oh, right. Oh, wow.
So that's a version. I don't know if it's a direct connection, but I just like the chicken feet made me think like, okay, so is that connected to the old witch tales?
Hmm. It'd be interesting if the so it'd be funny if what they experienced in the cabin wasn't even necessarily that connected to the actual creature, but the fact that the friend finds himself praying at the statue throughout his dreams kind of makes you kind of it lets you know that it definitely is connected to the creature itself.
Yeah, and it's like the woman in white mythos. I have no idea if that's the connection. It's just the chicken feet made me think about it.
Mhm.
Like it's connected to a lot of different things, and if you really want to go down the paranormal wormhole, which I do every day, which is why I randomly starts talking about it,
Mhm.
uh, but it's connected to a lot of different things, and a lot of different folklores have
Mhm.
their own story of her. Which is kind of bizarre, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, but the rest of the sculpture has no like connection to that lore that I can think of, at least.
Mhm. But no, it's definitely a creepy detail that yeah, I guess the way it's shot, especially that shot of the feet, the way it's shot, it's like so dark that you're not 100% sure what the feet are made of, but it does linger on the feet, but it's lit in a way that it's like the feet are definitely fleshy and tangible versus the rest of the thing that's obviously just all kind of wood,
Yeah,
which is very horrifying. But
yeah. I don't
then,
know.
yeah. So, sorry, what were you going to say? Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say I don't know enough about witchcraft to
Mm.
know exactly what that's supposed to mean, but it's definitely connected to the creature considering the horns.
Yes, yeah. Um, yeah, no. So, yeah. So the next thing, um, I'm sort of forgetting how much I talked about when we first tried to record the thing, when we first tried to record the stream. But yeah, the next kind of big thing that starts happening in the film after the cabin is that they all kind of have a shared nightmare that you see through the eyes of Luke.
Yeah,
Um, and it kind of comes to him in the form of reliving his past trauma, which was kind of experiencing his friend die again. Um, which I thought the interesting thing about that dream is that he never actually wakes up from it. It's like you'd think that there would be that moment where he snaps out of it and he wakes up in his bed or whatever, but he starts off in the cabin, he's bleeding, he wanders off into the woods, experiences all of this dreamy stuff, but then when he snaps out of it, like he doesn't really have a moment where he wakes up. It's like what he was experiencing was reality.
yeah, which and that's a hallucination, which makes me really wonder
Mhm.
about what all of these
Mhm.
things are. Um, so yeah, that I definitely thought that like that was an hallucination, and what's really happening was like the creature kind of drew him closer. If you were to
Mhm.
see what's really happening, it's him going after the creature's face like a zombie. Like the
Mhm.
creature has his hand inside his chest,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
like
Because
in Indiana Jones too.
because at the end, when the friend sees his wife, he's like feels reassured, and
Yeah,
his wife goes out to touch him, but then it turns out it's the creature's hand. So that's interesting. That there's a few instances where he has a brush with the creature through the guise of a hallucination early on, but it's never explained that what he is witnessing or touching or chasing is the creature itself. So maybe it's definitely worth a film rewatching, because I've only seen it once and I watched it today. So it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to watch it back again and see if there's anything I missed in relation to these hallucinations that he's kind of experiencing.
I think this was my 4th time watching this movie.
Oh, well.
I remember one time I watched it with my dad, and he has over 30 years experience in logging, and I remember him saying in the scene where he runs up to the ridge and it's like this forest and you see the hand in that scene.
Mhm.
I remember him going like, huh, this forest here, it's not doing too good. So those trees right there needed to be cut down so those trees could breed more, because I could see the growth pattern isn't really healthy for them. Yeah, that's what I was more thinking about the scary hand, but okay.
That'll, yeah. I was gonna say that was like, was he was more focused on that than the horror, but in a way it seemed like that stressed him out a bit more.
Yeah. Natural
I
growth, unhealthy growth patterns is not good for trees.
it's interesting that you said that you watched it with your dad, because I think that this is quite a dad film, and I think that my dad would really like it, because my dad does a lot of hiking and does a lot of fell walking, mountain climbing, and going on hikes through woods and stuff like that. And he does that with his friends on a regular basis, and they're obviously British kind of lads going on walks together and stuff like that. So I think my dad
No
would.
good old cap
Yeah.
on the head,
Yes,
high
yeah.
back bike.
Definitely. And I think that yeah, no, I think that he would really like this. I'm looking forward to either recommending it to him or maybe showing it to him one day, which because I think he'll really like it. It's definitely his type of film. He
Yeah.
watches lots of stuff about hikes. But yeah, no, I think he'll definitely like it. Um but yeah, no, going back to the nightmare, like we said pre-stream, um, it's interesting that each character experiences some kind of nightmarish thing, like the creature is showing them some sort of hallucination, something that relates to past trauma, stuff that scares them, stuff that makes them feel afraid. And we only ever really see the world through the eyes of Luke, the character played by Ray Spall. In which case, it's almost like there are different versions of this film going on in different characters' minds, because you
Yeah.
see Hutch scared out of his mind, and then you see the other two friends scared out of their mind, but you're not 100% sure what they're witnessing, which kind of makes it creepier in a way, because it's like you see the fear in their eyes, but you have no idea what they're experiencing. And I think that in a way you can assume that it's maybe even worse than what we're seeing Luke kind of see.
Yeah, and it's when you think back to it, you understand that this creature had the upper hand through the entire movie.
Mhm.
These guys were screwed the moment they walked into the woods. They were on its turf, and it made a call. And it's clear, like, this creature must have had some kind of motivation, some kind of belief system of its own, because it could have just ripped them apart at the cabin.
Mhm.
Instead, it doesn't.
It kind
It's
of,
weird because it's a
yeah.
massive magical elk. Like, it could have ripped off the roof and just tore them apart. Why does it systematically kill them? It doesn't kill Hutch at the cabin. It
Mhm.
easily could have. It just gets broken in and just killed him. But it kills Hutch at another point. It has the same opportunity. So, like, it clearly has some kind of reasoning behind it. I'm trying to figure out why.
Maybe maybe because Hutch was the least afraid of them, because he's the most conventionally kind of a hero He's the most level-headed and seems to kind of he's the most kind of masculine of the bunch. Maybe in a way, the creature didn't think that Hutch posed much of a threat, so he was more disposable because he, or maybe the creature saw Hutch as a threat specifically because he didn't. I mean, there is a moment where he's very afraid, but he's not as afraid as Luke or the other characters, if that makes sense. He's not. He's always a little bit more level-headed about the situation. Whereas maybe because Luke and the friend with glasses, I can't remember his name, but the friend with glasses and Luke, they're probably the most scared of the bunch, and therefore maybe that makes them more useful in the sacrifice towards the end. It's
True.
like they they're sort of the weakest, almost like the weakest as men, and then therefore that kind of sees them through to the very end, because maybe, I don't know, maybe the fear in them somehow makes the ritual work more. I don't know, but maybe the creature kills Hutch and then the other friend, not necessarily just to kill them, but
Yeah.
because it knew that killing them would make the other two way more afraid than they already were.
Yeah. Yeah. So that could be it. That could definitely be it. It's as I said in the beginning, you have to figure out a lot of this on your own,
Mhm.
like its intention and everything. So like, but I'm if you're gonna skip to the end,
Mhm.
like it clearly lets him go.
Yeah. Unless my thought was, because at that point he's out of the forest.
Yeah, it's no longer his turf. He can't do anything.
So either the creature can't leave the forest, or it had just made its peace with, like, okay, you can just go.
Bugger off.
I think that maybe after he screamed at it, he did this huge primal scream, and I think maybe that was the film's way of letting us know that he had no fear in him anymore, which is obviously a reoccurring thing because he was too afraid to help his friend at the start, and he was his fear kind of leads to incompetence,
Yeah.
and then his journey becomes about him becoming more heroic. And I think maybe by the end, he's attacked it, he's shot it, he's attacked it with an axe, and he's screamed at it in the face to kind of tell it that he's not going to give up, he's not going to back down. And at that point, it's like this creature, it just has no interest in going after him anymore.
Yeah,
It's like Predator. It reminded me of
well, I
Predator.
think for Predator 2.
Yeah.
Culture.
Very much so. It's like a supernatural predator. I love that scene with the when the village sort of starts burning, and Luke is pointing the gun at the creature. I think that's one of the most harrowing scenes with the creature, just because it's probably the first time you get a really good look at it for for a long period of
Yeah.
time. Just very harrowing, because up until then you get a sense of, like, maybe the creature is sort of animalistic kind of thing, but the more you see of it, the less kind of real it seems, and the more kind of otherworldly it seems. Um, but yeah, no, I wasn't necessarily scared of the idea of there being a big moose that was the villain, but gradually throughout the film, the more I kind of saw of it, the more I thought it was a genuinely creepy kind of monster.
Did you catch it in the background any of the times?
There is that one shot, not not really in the background. There's that one shot of the Luke and the friend who doesn't have glasses. They go into the woods, and there's like a shot of it kind of sort of in the distance walking up
Yeah.
the hill with them. And then in the shot that you see them next, it's shot a little bit more close up, so you can't really see where the creature is. But that was creepy because that was kind of seeing the creature during the daytime. So you know that it's not limited to only coming out at night or whatever.
Yeah. And I think I saw it a couple other times. It might just be my brain saying like it's there because you're telling yourself that, but be that. But I think I saw it a couple other times. There's like another
Yeah.
time when they leave the cabin and find the path. It's like a big red flag. I would say a path, but from their perspective, it's more savoring a savior, and I can see why. But I think I saw its silhouette in the background right there.
I'll
Could
have to
be wrong.
rewatch it. Yeah, I'll have to rewatch it and see if I can point out, because like I say, the first time I watched it, I wasn't 100% sure what the creature even was, so I wouldn't even really have known what to be looking out for.
Yeah, I think I see the elk shape a couple of times and it's a creepy thought that this thing was following them all the time. I'm sure you can
Yeah,
find some YouTube videos like all the creatures discovered, all of these places. Ding, 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 ding.
I could maybe I'll make one as a TikTok.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. Yeah,
We could
but we have to.
definitely make a TikTok about this movie.
Yeah, definitely. We have to wrap up now.
Okay, yeah.
Our overall thoughts on the movie.
Yeah, to summarize my overall thoughts on the movie, I am just going to go slightly back to when Hutch dies. And when Hutch dies, one of the members of the friendship group lets out a scream that is blood curdling in the way that you would typically expect from like almost like a female scream, like a final girl sort of scream. But it's from like a middle-aged man, and that's not something that you see in horror that often. Horror in general, it doesn't, or just films in general, they don't show you men in situations that are like it's clear that the men are feeling true fear, and you don't often hear men scream and that kind of thing. And I think for that reason, this film, the the horror struck a little bit harder for me, like in a good way. Like I found it more scary because it was kind of like men who were coded as kind of masculine, who typically you would think, in films at least, quite often, like they brush away, they brush away stuff that's scary, or they save the day or whatever. But it was like clear that they were powerless to the creature, and they didn't know anything about how to kind of save themselves from the situation. And I think that probably was quite intentional on the filmmaker's part to make it the story of these men who are just powerless. But yeah, no, I really, really liked it. There's not a lot about it that I didn't enjoy. It's relatively short. It's only about 90 minutes, and therefore it doesn't feel like it overstays its welcome. It just it's very well structured. I think that's my favorite thing about it, is that it's like very much like first, second, and third act, in a way that feels quite satisfying. Um, what I guess my final question to you was, is there anything that you don't particularly like about this film? Is there anything that you could is there anything you would change?
I would say more explanation.
Mm.
This movie needs explanation on some parts that we have highlighted in this discussion,
Mhm.
and I think like yeah, less is scary, but I want an explanation. Like give
Mhm.
me an explanation. It's like the mummified people. Like if you told me that those people have been alive for so long, they're living mummies and they can't stop it. That would
Mhm.
still be horrifying because the thought of being like living dead, a living corpse, is
Mhm.
horrifying. And you
See,
can't move,
see,
and all you can do is scream and breathe, like screaming for pain. I don't think an explanation would make it less scary. So give it an explanation.
I agree with you there. There are probably there are bits there's things about it that I like not knowing,
Yeah,
but like you say, stuff that relates to the cult specifically, and the concept of like immortality, and the history about the cult, probably would be, yeah, like I said, probably a little bit scarier if you knew a little bit more about why. But I guess maybe that comes from they never really meet any characters who know a lot about the cult, and a lot of the cult don't speak English.
we have a character giving an explanation,
Mm,
called like expo
exposition.
exposition, a
Yeah.
dump about the creature's background story. Like it could,
Mm,
like if you're gonna do that,
mm,
like some more.
mm.
If you are at that point, like push it a little. You can
Yeah.
afford it because if you're gonna have a dump, have a dump. Don't take a half dump.
Yeah,
It's
no,
just gonna constipate my thoughts.
I agree with that. I think that maybe the way around that is if it was a little bit longer, you could have had maybe a little bit in the start. Like I say, maybe a little bit similar to Midsummer, where you have some kind of tour guide that maybe explains some of the mythos surrounding the kind of woods. Um, because obviously none of the main characters really know anything. Um, but yeah, no, I guess I would agree with that. Um, but then that said, I like how short it was.
Yeah,
So I'm
I
just,
do
yeah.
like it. I do like the short, and another thing, like how, like explain that it's her. Maybe
Mhm.
if I was a smart person, I could figure out that it was the same actress in the picture.
Mhm.
'Cause I maybe you can figure that out for the
They were
picture
they
too.
they were some very Swedish looking people in the picture.
She is a very Swedish looking person, so
Mm.
maybe I don't
They,
know.
they had like jumpers on and hats and mittens and things. They looked very conventionally Swedish from my point of view.
Yeah, I would
Um,
say that is very Swedish. That's like um what are you doing, you insane cat? But anyway, um, so yeah, it's the typical Volvo villa vovve life.
mm.
Volvo house dog.
Yeah, no,
Um,
yeah, definitely. You could tell that it was kind of like they were a little bit like, what's the from the filmmaker's point of view, it's like, what's the quickest way for people to understand that this is just a typical kind of Swedish family?
giant IKEA sign on
Oh,
villa.
I would say, like, for me, one thing that's not necessarily criticism, and this is me trying to wrap it up because this is me just focusing on the negatives for a little bit.
Needs to be
Yeah,
wrapped up.
yeah. Sorry. Um, a lot of the dialogue is like there are jokes that don't necessarily land, and there are things that the friends say to each other that sound, maybe a little bit unnatural. But I didn't necessarily think of it as badly written jokes or unnatural dialogue. I found it more like when you're with your friends, half of the time, jokes that people say don't necessarily land, or people ignore it, or people brush over what someone has just said. And also, as well, like, quite often in big group conversations, there is, you know, dialogue back and forth between people that's like a little bit awkward, a little bit stilted. So I think that initially I thought like, oh, is this dialogue bad? But then as the film went on, I thought that it's just not very Hollywoody, and I think that's actually a strength in the film, is that it feels a little bit more naturalistic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so overall, a great horror movie, a great atmosphere movie. If you like A24, if you like supernatural horror, I would definitely recommend this movie. And great creature design. If you like great creature design, I would recommend this movie. And for more horrific content, definitely check out SwedishNerd.com. Link is in my Instagram description at a Swedish horror nerd on Instagram. So you can find it there, but you can also Google Swedish nerd. That was no explanation, but anyway. Yeah, so definitely check out SwedishNerd.com. We're both are involved with that. That's my own creation. Mine and my technical manager, Linus Creation. So definitely check that out, and I will talk to you next time. It's great having you on.
Well, yeah, thank you. No, it's been great. It's gone very quickly, I would say.
Yeah, so bye for now, I would say.
Cool. Bye. I'm looking at the camera now. Bye.